Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, DXP, the Content Challenge. My name is Kamen Damyanov. I'm a solution engineer with Progress, working with Sitefinity, and our guest speaker for today is Fergal McHugh, Head of Strategy at our partner Arekibo. Just a couple of words about Sitefinity at the beginning. Progress Sitefinity is a content management and digital experience platform with analytics that show developers and marketeers to allowing them to deliver, optimize, and scale compelling, unified, and personalized omnichannel experiences. With Sitefinity, you can create engaging experiences with the fastest time to market that's available. The most user-friendly CMS that's Sitefinity, delivering rapid and cost-effective sites, B2B, B2C, and B2E experiences with creating them with unparalleled and also providing means of creating personalization and analytics to optimize the customer journey, and not forgetting the rapid time to market with multiple sites and multiple languages for multiple regions. Sitefinity is designed to solve several key challenges. Some of them you see on the screen. So first one is reduce the reliance on IT when delivering intuitive, multi-site, multilingual, and multi-channel or omni-channel content. The second one is deliver personalized experiences, again detached from the IT department and backed up by actionable analytics, audience discovery, the ability to tailor your messaging and digital marketing with only out-of-the-box functionality. The third one is getting to the market faster. This is provided with cloud-enabled, extensive, and connected ASP.NET platform. And the fourth key challenge is achieving operational efficiency, no matter of being B2B or B2C or an e-commerce site with a search tailored to your business. And now, of course, we're moving on to the content of today's webinar, the content challenge, and heading over to Fergal.
Thank you very much, Carmen. So today's webinar is on the content challenge, and I'm just going to get right in. So the structure is roughly in three parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about why our content strategy is failing our DXP investment. I'm going to then talk a little bit about how personalization works, because I think it's a misunderstanding of concepts of personalization that are kind of lead us to this. And then finally, I want to discuss some kind of strategic tips about how to actually develop an experience-enabled content strategy, the sort of content strategy that's going to help us actually maximize that investment. So the first section. So I think it's worth just saying a little bit at the outset what a DXP is, or a digital experience platform. And really, it's a tool set that enables us to deliver and manage digital experiences, but also to coordinate those experiences across channels. And I think in a kind of a paradigm shift from traditional content management systems, it's a tool set that enables us to build relationships, and in order to, it allows us to interact with our users and customers in kind of new and richer ways. And all of that leads to a situation where we have opportunities to store and redeploy value. We can gather a better understanding of how our customers interact with us, and then we can bring that to bear on in terms of actually delivering them better experiences. So why talk about experiences? Well, you know, in line with what I said in the last point, there, experiences they create value. They're interactive. They're more. It's more than a one-sided conversation. They're engaging. They're focused on the relevance and the stuff that we actually need, stuff that actually on giving us content and giving us informing us on things that we actually need to know about. And then finally, when you put all these kind of bits together, you get the experiences are meaningful. They have some value to us. They have some. There's something extra happening in the transaction. So when we're thinking about DXP and really maximizing, you know, our investment in DXP, there are three primary challenges. I think there's a data challenge around getting this sort of information or getting the data that we need into the system in order to in order to actually harness its features. And there are challenges there are people find that there are challenges there around things like around data quality and so on. There are also technology challenges, just the actually getting the getting the software procured and getting the platform set up and integrating with your existing business systems, and there's a whole range of strategies that they need to be considered there. But neither of those are my focus today. What I really want to talk about today is the content challenge, and what I want to think about is how our content approach is needs to be tailored to getting the most out of our DXP. Now, one of the things that is really most important when we think about content for a digital experience platform, and when we think about content in this kind of context, is that the content should be relevant. But we have a little bit of a problem with the ideas of personalization that are at the heart of maximizing a DXP. And this is a little quote from Gartner from a recent report, where they're predicting that a lot of marketeers who have been investing in personalization efforts are going to be will abandon them by 2025. And they talk about a couple of different reasons for why this is the case. They talk about data issues. This stuff I already talked about volume quality and the regulatory landscape. There are also just issues with, for example, tracking and so on that are related there. Issues with trust and just a general use of certain kinds of more surveillance-oriented marketing techniques and so on. But I don't think this is the whole story. Obviously, these are challenges that we need to consider. But I think we also need to consider that there are other reasons, and at least one of those reasons are about that we're not actually feeding our DXP with the kind of with the personalization ready content that we need to in order to maximize that. So my thought here is that one of the problems here from the content perspective is we're not taking the right approach. And one of the reasons I think we're not taking the right approach is that there's a lack of understanding of DXP concepts in terms of personalization. We're not really thinking about personalization when we develop our content strategy. And then there's just we're just as it were stuck in the frame or stuck in the mud in some of our concepts. We have certain kind of bad habits or old habits and practices that belong to the more standard way of creating content strategy for our CMS platform, and we haven't kind of transformed that into something new. So what I kind of want to advocate here today is that we kind of need to turn a lot of what we know about content strategy on its head. We need to just kind of do something of a reversal. And we need to think about the kind of these kind of pillars of content strategy, our strategic direction, the content approach, our information architecture, and our goals, and these kind of key pillars of our digital content strategy, and kind of revise our view in terms of what we think is important. So from an overall strategic perspective, I think what we've been seeing is a situation where personalization is an afterthought. Our standard sense of content strategy kind of dominates personalization strategy. We think, what do we need to do with our content first? What's it for? What's it going to do? And then we kind of think of personalization second. And what I want to say here is that I think we need to be thinking about personalization first. And I think the analogy here would be with what the patterns that we saw in relation to developing for the mobile web and for mobile form factors. And it took, as it were, the UX industry quite a while to come around to an understanding that once the browser habits and consumer habits had changed, that design processes and design principles needed to change as well, and we needed to move to effectively a mobile first approach. And mobile couldn't be, for example, an afterthought to our user experience design approaches. And I think the same is with our content strategy. Another issue I think that we're facing content is this kind of macro content approach. We're thinking of content, when we think of content in the traditional way, we're generally focused on building out large, expensive kind of units of content that we expect to endure for a long period of time. And what we're neglecting, I think, is an alternative approach where we're dealing with smaller units of content, but more of them, and allowing those smaller units of content to combine in various ways to create experiences for our users. So that's something else that we need to turn on its head. In information architecture, I think traditionally, and certainly when we've been thinking about information architecture for developing for the web, the traditional way has been this kind of top-down IA. I kind of start from the very top of my information hierarchy, and I define some kind of broad areas, and then I just kind of work down that scale. And what I kind of get from that is I get this architecture which is very well organized, but often isn't very flexible. It's not the sort of thing that I need for a constantly changing adaptive environment. I end up with something kind of rigid. And again, we need to think about what that means and the ways in which that might be holding us back. And then finally, I think that when we're thinking about the process of goal formation vis-a-vis our content strategy, we spend, I think, far too much time in thinking about what our content is from a kind of very, very high level, and what we expect to get out of it, and defining kind of KPIs for content and so on. And obviously all of this is very, very important. These are really, really important things to do. But I think that we are increasingly doing that at neglect of actually creating and building systematic approach to actually delivering content to our platform into the organization. So we're basically spending a lot of time talking and thinking about where we're going, and not spending enough time actually getting there. So I think just to end this section, I think what we need to look at is this kind of strategy reversal, to just turn things around and put personalization at the heart of our approach. Think about content in a more modular way. Think about our architecture from a bottom-up, more flexible way, rather than trying to enforce order from the top. And then start to think a little bit more about what a system would be like than constant debating what our goals need to be. And I think to understand how this kind of reversal works, and particularly since I think that the misunderstanding of what personalization is about is the heart of it, I just want to take us very quickly through a kind of a conceptual model of how personalization works before thinking again about how we can actually practically improve our content strategies. So that's my next section. So personalization begins with a customer, and that customer has a set of, kind of prior knowledge. They have a set of competences, they have interests, they've had maybe past interactions with my business or organization, or organizations like mine, and they have certain things that they want to get out of. They're on my website, or on my channel, or wherever they are, whatever part of their my digital surface they're interacting with, they're there for a reason. And as people managing a platform and using a platform to deliver experiences, we're looking to plug the customer into that. So the customers come to us, and we're looking to deliver back a kind of an experience like interaction with our organization. And an experience doesn't occur in a vacuum. It doesn't just occur in a kind of without a context. So the second major area that we have to kind of think about is that we have to think about that an experience involves a customer in a context, and that context has got, the stuff that we're already familiar with, like, for example, location, where they're actually coming from, their kind of their device and form factor, environment, whether or not they're kind of coming through from another platform, the kind of referrer and social context, how they actually, the journey that they took before they came to us, and then also just as it were, their historical context with us. Is it their first time? What have they done before when they've interacted with us? So in many ways, an experience involves bringing these things together. A customer in a context at our platform are the basis of a personalizable experience. And then, of course, it's not just a kind of an abstract happening out there. We're providing this platform capability and this experience capability because we're looking for something. There's a business context, there's a strategy, there's something that we're trying to do on digital channels. There's something that we think that we want our customers to do, and there's something that we think that they want from us. So all of this is happening in a kind of in our business context, in our strategic context. And what we're really looking to do is we're really looking to triangulating the sort of and developing the sort of digital experiences that reflect and that kind of balance out these various, what the customer needs, how they're encountering us, and what we expect to get, what we're looking for as an organization. The role of content here is really to feed into this into this platform. Content is the oil. It's the juice that keeps all this going. Ultimately, what the customer experience will be primarily the content that we put into it. And of course, the key thing is that for the DXP is that the DXP allows us to take to model these customer and experience contexts and actually bring them in. So it's crucial when we're thinking about our content as we bring it, as we push content into our platform, to think that the content is going to have to play a part in actually leveraging these customer models and the context models that are being provided by our DXP. So I think that kind of the overall kind of content strategy lesson here in relation to this overview of personalization is that when we think about content strategy, we need to have something that's going to work with this and not against it. It needs to be our content strategy needs to be as organic and dynamic as the DXP allows us to be. And we need to think about the DXP as an engine that requires this kind of this content raw material, and that this raw material needs to go in, and the raw material needs to enable us to actually pursue this balance between the customer and the context and what we're trying to do as an organization. And if we don't keep that in mind, I think we're not going to be able to leverage our organization to create the content that we need, and we're not going to have the success that we want with our DXP. So that really brings me on to the third part of this webinar, and bringing all this together to actually develop an experience-enabled content strategy. So I kind of think that we should stop talking about kind of content strategy, and we should start talking about digital experience strategy. And whereas I see traditional content strategy as being kind of, inflexible and programmatic, an experience strategy is much more organic. So my definition here is it's a constantly evolving guide to action, is to continually optimize our content in order to turn it into experience. And I think this is an impact as well from how we actually strategize and how we design. We need to think away. We need to move away from paradigms of kind of rigid experience design to an idea of experience orchestration, of bringing together lots of elements and combining in the moment, rather than as it were having planned out and having everything figured out in advance. We need to be basically more flexible, more organic to match the reality of the landscape. So I mentioned earlier in kind of my tips or my approach to turning some of the traditional content strategy ideas on the head, that this macro content is not friendly to our approach. And I talked about something as an alternative, which is modular content. So modular content, here's the definition. Modular content are basically the smallest units of content which can be deployed on their own, but which can also participate as pieces of larger content items. And what I've listed here is some of the benefits that I see with content modularity. We kind of have increased. We've got resilience. We've got basically just more kind of strength in numbers. We've got increased reach in terms of we've got more options. We've got more options, more content options for our users, for our platform, with the ability to answer to the needs of more people. We should be able to drive increased engagement by creating smaller, more easy to interact with, easy to consume chunks of content, and just reduce the effort that our users or our customers need to put into actually consuming our content. We can support scale by bringing smaller pieces into larger pieces, and actually actually scale up from micro experiences to larger macro experiences for more engaged customers, or for more involved things that we're trying to do. And we should see cost reduction, because we don't end up having to put the large teams that we need to put together for big macro content items. We should be able to pick a smaller group of subject matter experts, or even one or two, and produce the content more quickly and more effectively. And then I think crucially, and then going back to the idea of all of this being tasked with feeding a personalization first strategy, we have potential for a better return signal from the user. We have more surface out there effectively for the user to interact with, and therefore we're able to, as it were, garner more feedback, from more interactive feedback from the user about how they're actually consuming that content. We just get a better sense of how people are interacting with our content. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about modularity at work. And the general idea here is that we kind of need to start to think about our content as being kind of networked. So what we're looking at here, for example, are basically three effectively clusters of content. One is a cluster in the bottom left-hand corner is the cluster of content that we would normally associate, say, for example, on the website of a PLC, on the as the investor relations content. That's the whole area that deals with talking to investors. The one on the top would be the sort of like what the organization is about, its positions on things like sustainability and basically its commitment to CSR and so on. So all about that actual more touchy-feely framing of the organization in terms of not just in terms of who they are and what they're about. And then in the bottom right, I have a kind of the cluster of what we would traditionally think of as kind of news and news and updated information. And the way to think about this kind of content network is that the content items that belong to a cluster are much more tightly linked. But they can also link out to other clusters as well. So our customer case studies, for example, are of interest potentially to an investor who's looking to see how the company they're investing with are bringing new customer acquisitions online. But there are also things that we may just want to push out in terms of our regular news channels, and equally they might form part of larger stories about how we're innovating as an organization. And the key thing to think about here is that if our content is highly modular, what we're able to do is we're able to generate links between our content items that we wouldn't be able to do. We wouldn't be able to do without that if we were dealing with larger kind of macro items. In other words, if we were doing a situation where all we can do is really refer someone onto another link. So what we can conceive with modularity at work is we can conceive of a situation where somebody's spending enough time in, say, for example, the case study area of an IR website. We can just slowly let that area of the website evolve into something more like the more touchy-feely position of the firm. We can blend these kind of boundaries, and we can make this smoother transition between, for example, numbers and marketing content, if that's the signals that the user are giving us. But we can only do that insofar as the users are actually giving us signals. We can only do that insofar as we have the raw material in place that allow us to actually to allow us to make that experience kind of smoothly and continuously better as the user progresses. So what I think this kind of approach has, you know, has overall context, or has overall kind of meaning for our content strategy. And I think one way of thinking about that is that instead of, as it were, defining our strategy in advance from a kind of a high level and just going deeper over time, we find ourselves in a situation where we kind of need to basically constantly go back and forth between a kind of a large picture or a big picture view and a small picture view, and just basically continually retune. So in line with this kind of reversal approach, I kind of think that what we need to do is, instead of starting with investing a huge amount of work and actually planning out our strategy, we need to start with, as it were, on a smaller scale, and start with our micro chunks of content and build out larger experiences, and let our users inform our next steps. So our strategy is constantly, as it were, molded by our interactions with the user, rather than trying to impose order in advance. And I think when we take this more flexible approach, there are kind of two kind of key questions that need to come out. And what we need to do is we need to separate out the sort of things that for example, I as a marketer, or I as somebody managing a content team need to do, and what effectively the sort of stuff that I can automate. And what I really need to be doing, and again in the context of maximizing my DXP investment, is I need to be balancing out these activities. So this diagram here, I think is tasked with kind of giving a kind of an overview of two types of kind of optimizing, or two types of decision-making activity. So what I have on the right is, we have effectively a model where we've got content, as it were, in the system flowing into our platform, and that content is being used to provide experiences to customers, and customers are reacting to that simply by consuming it or not consuming it, by the amount of time they spend with it, about where they click next. What I need to be doing is, I need to be capturing that information and integrating that more or less in real time in order to improve the experience. And that's something I can just kind of, as it were, let my DXP do. I can let my DXP actually do a lot of that work for me. What I need to do on my side is, I just need to make sure that it has the content that it needs to do that I'm giving it the content in the form that it needs, in this kind of modular, networkable kind of way, in order to feed that process. So that's on the right side. On the left side, I've got this kind of more near term and kind of longer term views. And here, what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to think about the lessons that I'm getting from those kind of user actions, as it were, in real time and in the shorter term, and trying to think about how I can do things better in the longer term. So how I can optimize my experiences, you know, in the longer view. And these are the things that I need to do, maybe, like, for example, making adjustments to my content approach and thinking about focusing more in other areas, or trying to make my content more modular, or building in different media types, and really kind of responding to all that and deciding where I'm going to spend my money in the future, and also incorporating new information about where my business and organization is going, and making sure that I'm constantly incorporating that, so the experience is up to date. And I think the general lesson here is that if we don't allow the right side, as it were, of this diagram, if we don't allow the automated side do its work and take care of that closer time optimization for the customer, we spend our time constantly trying to do that manually. We don't get time to spend between the larger we don't get time to spend on the longer term view. What we really need to do is really get back and think about what our platform does best for us without our regular intervention, and then what are the places where our platform is going to need the regular intervention, and kind of and manage it appropriately. And again, just to reiterate, I think the key thing is that if we can get a modular approach to content in there, and get our content down into these bite-sized, single topic, interactable or networkable chunks, we're going to make that process, both from both perspectives, easier on ourselves. So I think there's an overall lesson here that what we need to be doing is that we need to kind of move away from content strategies where we're trying to define the experience fully in advance, and kind of substitute that for a kind of a more open, kind of evolving approach, where I kind of I'm bringing the customer into my strategy, their reactions, the information, the signals that I'm getting, and I'm bringing that back in, and then I'm letting, as it were, letting that basically structure both the immediate experience I'm getting, but also from a strategic level, stepping back and letting me focus my longer term goals. And I think that there's a risk with with a lot of organizations when we think about our DXP investment, that we think we kind of have to have everything worked out in advance, and that's the only way to secure the investment. And I think that the issue here is that if we do that too much, or we do that in too strong a manner, we're going to get a situation where it's going to end up costing us more in the long run, because we won't be able to really get the benefits of that investment. So I think as I kind of move toward closing here, I think it's worth kind of pointing out that one of the things that we tend to do too much of in advance is this sort of planning, this detailed planning, a detailed definition that kind of goes out the window. And this kind of very interesting book on atomic habits really talks about a kind of a general orientation that we should take in kind of general, kind of, as it were, in terms of as it were, getting what we want out of a process or out of an experience, to kind of move away from constant, or as it were, goal obsession, and start putting some of that energy we put into goal obsession into our process. And he rightly points out, I think, that both that in a game scenario, both winners and losers have the same goals. They're both trying to achieve the same thing. It's really system. It's really system that makes the difference. Another crucial point here is that the too much emphasis on goals is at odds with long-term progress, primarily because your views are fixed. You're not seeing the opportunities that present themselves, as it were, in the moment, or that present themselves from those interactions. So too much, and I think the lesson here is that too much content strategy, or too much predefined content strategy, blinds us to the opportunities that our platform is, as it were, signaling back to us, and we need to make sure that we remain open to that. So really, just to sum up here, the final strategy lessons of this webinar are really that, yes, we do need a solid content strategy, but we don't need everything worked out. What we really need is that we need a rough story of where we're going. We need enough clarity to get the process started, but then we need to, as it were, let our interaction with the platform help us develop from there. We need to cultivate good content habits. We need to think about content less as a kind of a one-off project thing that we do only rarely, and actually introduce content, the development of content, as it were, into our organization's kind of everyday life. And the content modularity approach works on two sides here. I think it enables us, the regular production of content or content modularity is enabled by regular production of content, but it's also easier to produce smaller units than it is larger units on a regular basis. And we shouldn't try and basically do too much in advance and get too far ahead of ourselves. We should basically rather keep our eye open for the opportunities presented by the system and remain open to them. And we should really just constantly watch this balance between goal and process. Yes, let's think about exactly what we want the content to do, but not neglect the fact that we need to constantly find new kind of content resources to improve these experiences in the organization, and do that and focus on goal at the expense of that kind of activity. And then finally, we just need to remember this crucial paradigm shift between the traditional content management system and the digital experience platform. We have moved to an approach where we've put an actual principles like relevance, a more personalized, more relevant, more targeted, more interactive experience at the heart of what we're trying to do. And we have to make sure that our content strategy is directed at that capability, and that maximizing that capability doesn't become an afterthought. So that ends my presentation for today. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I would like to thank the team at Progress and the team at Arekibo for making this happen. Thank you very much.